Hey everyone, this is Joel at Hamina Wireless. In this video, we're going to talk about scope zones in Hamina Network Planner. Now, scope zones are used to define where you do and don't care about having network coverage. Typically, you're going to define the edges of your building as being in scope, and then you might use out of scope zones to define areas that you don't care about having network coverage, like elevators and stairwells and janitorial closets and things like that. So let me show you how those work. So I've just uploaded this floor plan, and the machine learning has actually already found a scope in the building automatically. It's actually found the edges of the building and automatically defined a scope zone for that. And the way that you can tell is if you look at the outsides of the building, you'll notice that there's this diagonal pattern outside. That shows that the outside of the building is out of scope. But if we zoom in a little bit and get nice and close, notice that the scope zone sort of fades away as it approaches the outside of the building. That's because while the machine learning has found the scope and it's being used, we as the user haven't approved that scope yet. So it's a little bit of a sort of fuzzy scope for now. So let's fix that. So what I'll do is I'll go over to the scope zones tool and notice that there's this little sparkle next to it, indicating that it's found something automatically and it's just waiting for us to accept it. So I'll click on the scope zones tool, and now you can see that it says auto scope found, and it asks us to either deny it or discard it or to accept it. So let's go ahead and accept it. And now you can see that we have this nice hard edge around the edges of the building here. And you can see that that diagonal pattern stops very abruptly there to show that this is a scope that the user has approved or manually drawn into the building. And if you look around the edges here, it looks pretty good. You can see it found the edges here pretty well. But for the sake of illustration, I want to show you how to draw a scope zone manually, just in case you're doing something maybe in an outdoor environment or somewhere where the machine learning just doesn't find the scope properly, or if you want to be a little bit more you want to be a little more exact in where things are. You have very specific requirements or something like that. So let's do that. So I'll grab the edit tool, and I'm just going to click on the edge of our scope zone. Notice I can't click in the center of it to select it. I need to click on the edge, and then I'll just hit the delete key to remove that scope entirely. But wait, what just happened? We already have these diagonal marks back, and the edge is fuzzy, and the machine learning will automatically reapply the scope. So that way, if you accidentally delete it, you don't lose it and have to start your project over. So to get rid of it permanently, I'm going to open up the scope zones tool and hit the discard button. And now it's gone, and now we can start to manually draw something in. So let's do that. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can draw scope zones in Hamina, and this is actually true for basically any type of area, like an attenuating object or a capacity zone or anything like that. You can draw a scope by clicking and drawing a rectangle and releasing the mouse button, and it'll just draw a rectangle. So let's do another one. There we go. There's another scope zone. But let's delete these. So I'll click on this one and hit delete. Click on this one and hit delete, and we'll go back to our scope zone tool. Let's also, for this project, let's draw a freeform scope zone around our building here. So I'll just do a left click, left click, left click, and every time I want to add a point, it's just going to be an additional left click. See this little jog right here? I'm going to get nice and close for that. Go left click, and then zoom back out. I like to use the space bar to pan around. So I'm now holding down the space bar and just moving my mouse. I do that all the time. That's my favorite way to pan around in Hamina. You could sort of skateboard around like this. Okay, so we've got most of this traced in, but for the sake of example, I'm going to leave this courtyard area open for now. We'll come back to that. So we'll do a left click, and then now, just like drawing walls, to stop, we're going to do a right click to stop. And there we go. Now you can see that we have our scope around the edges of our building. Let's throw some APs in here to kind of make the scope zone pop a little bit more. So we'll add some walls. We'll just accept the automatic walls that it found. Good. And I'm going to go hide the walls we'll open the edit tool and go to the visibility tool. I just want to, they're already hidden. So perfect. Okay, so we got the walls are out of the way. So now what we'll do is let's take care of this courtyard area here. Now I intentionally left this courtyard as being out of scope. I was going to drop some APs in here. So let's do that. Yeah, we'll just whack a few APs around in here. Yeah, that looks fine. I'm going to pull this one over here just so I can have a couple of spots that don't have very good coverage. So yeah, what if we want to take this courtyard area out of scope? How could we do that? Well, there's a couple of different ways. There's one way that I'm not a huge fan of. It's totally fine. You can do it. I'm not a big fan of it. And there's another way that I'm a big fan of. So I'll show you both of them. So let's grab the scope zone tool again, and let's talk about out of scope zones. So we can take areas out of scope in the project by simply drawing another scope zone. So this elevator right here, let's just take it out of scope. So I'm just going to right click and drag like that, release the mouse button, and notice that Hamina automatically categorized this as an out of scope zone. So it's like a negative scope zone basically. Now you can switch something from being in scope and out of scope with this little contextual toolbar that pops up. It'll usually pop up automatically, so if you want to pick something from here, you can. But if you need to get to it after the fact, grab the edit tool and click on the edge of the zone. See that now I've got it selected. You can see it selected up here as well. And then you're going to right click on the edge of the zone. So let me show you again. You can't click on the inside of the zone to select it. You need to click on the edge of the zone and then right click the edge of the zone. And now you can choose between an in scope zone, we'll right click it again, or an out of scope zone. There's also a move function here if you want to move something around. And there's also the ability to delete something. But what I like to do is I just grab the edit tool, select it one way or another, and hit the delete key or the backspace key on my keyboard. That's usually how I do it. Okay, so now that we know how to do that, let's go chop out our courtyard area. So to do that, I'll grab the scope zones tool, and I'm just going to draw a couple rectangles here. So we'll just right click and drag and let go. And then I'll go from this corner and we'll right click and drag, and we'll go up here and I'll let go. So yeah, it totally worked. It did take those areas out of scope for the project, but I don't love it. And the reason why is complexity. The more items you add to a map, the more possibility there are for mistakes. It's easy to accidentally, click and drag something and move it on accident or something like that. Maybe you don't notice for a while, and maybe the undo key just isn't going to get you back to where you need to be anymore. I like to keep things simple if I can. So let me show you how I would prefer to do this to keep it neat and clean and simple. So I'm just going to select these. I'm going to click on that one and hit the delete key. Click on this one and hit the delete key. And I'm going to turn the heat map off just to get it out of the way. And we might bring it back later to illustrate some things. But I'd rather edit this scope zone that I've drawn. Now, ideally what I would have done is when I drew it, when I showed you how I was going to manually draw it, I would have just done the whole thing in one go. Got all the corners, got all the edges, things like that. But sometimes that's just not how it goes. So let's say you want to edit this. So I'll grab the edit tool, of course. I'll click on the edge to select it. And now notice that we have these control points here. We can edit these control points by clicking and dragging them. And you can click along the path to place new points. So see, I have that little plus symbol on my mouse cursor. So I'm just going to drop a couple in right here. So we'll put one here, we'll put one here, and I'll add one more right here. And then to move these around, I'll zoom in a little bit so we can get nice and precise here. I'm just going to left click and drag and put those where I want them. So I'll come over here, we'll do the same thing up here, put it right there. This one, we'll put it right here. And then, I accidentally added, I've got one that was already here and I added another one on accident. How do we get rid of that? Well, to get rid of it, I'm going to hold down the Option key on my keyboard. And notice now my mouse cursor shows a little minus symbol when we mouse over that. So now that I've got that minus symbol from holding down Option, this is going to be Alt if you're on Windows. I'll just click on it and, let me try again. There we go. And now that just removed it. So let's do this one as well. And it just removed that point. Cool, almost done. Let's add a couple more here. So I'll click one here and here and here. Oops, see what I just did there? Instead of clicking, I accidentally clicked and dragged ever so slightly. I actually do this fairly often. So to fix that, I'm just going to hit Command Z. That's going to be Control Z if you're on Windows, and it's just going to put my scope zone back where it was. Let's try again. Hopefully, maybe the developers, I'll show them this video, and maybe they can change that behavior a little bit. It'd help out all of us. So now we've got those points. We'll just tuck them into the corners like that, and there we go. Now we've got our scope of the project defined. So I just want to talk about some other things that you can use a scope for. Let's turn our heat map back on for that. The main thing that I use scope zones for is going through a building with a customer or a key stakeholder to define where they do and don't want wireless coverage. Most people will say, if you ask them, where do you want Wi-Fi in their building, the default answer is going to be, well, I want it everywhere. But then if you start asking some questions like, okay, do you want it in the stairwells? Because we can put it in the stairwells, but it's going to be $1,000 for the AP and about $1,000 to get a cable in there. So you're looking at about $2,000 per stairwell. Is that really something you want? And usually that's when customers or stakeholders will say, yeah, you're right. Maybe we don't need it in the stairwells or the elevators or things like that. So I like to use this as a source of truth. I like to use the scope zone as a record of where we agreed that we would and we would not worry about having wireless coverage. So you agree on it ahead of time, you install the network, and everybody's on the same page about where there's going to be wireless coverage and where there's not going to be wireless coverage. Like for example, we might say this stairwell right here, we might take that out of scope. Okay, the other thing that I like to use it for is for seeing how much of the network I am meeting requirements on. So for example, if we look at this map, you can see that we've got an area up here where we don't have good coverage down here, and there's this other little staircase that goes down into a basement. We don't have good coverage there either. We can tell exactly what percentage of the heat map, what percentage of the in-scope area of the project is green by hovering our mouse over our legend. So you can see that 92% of my heat map is green, and in my opinion, that means meeting requirements. Here, that means that we've got minus 65 dBm of coverage or better. So we're looking at 92% of our floor plan is meeting that requirement. So when I design these networks, I tend to say I want 95% of my floor plan to be meeting all of my requirements. That's a good rule of thumb for a general purpose use wireless network. If you're doing something super mission critical, like maybe automated robotics in a warehouse or something like that, you might really need like 100% on everything everywhere. It just depends on the network that you're designing and what the requirements for the network are. But let's get this above 95%. So one way that I could fix this is maybe by moving some APs around. So now if we go look, okay, now we're at 96%. So I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to add any more APs. I just needed to move things around a little bit to get it where I needed things to be. But the other thing that we could do is we could also boost the transmit power. So I'll hit Command A and select all my access points. And I'm just going to go bump my transmit power up to maybe like 16 dBm or something like that. And now we're looking at 98% coverage. So you can see how that's a really useful tool for looking to see what percentage of the heat map or the map in general is meeting those network requirements. All right, one more thing I want to show you. If you're using the AutoPlan APs tool, then this is going to define where it will and will not place access points. So I'm going to delete all my APs really quick. So starting with a clean slate, but we still have our scopes and our walls and everything. We'll go back to the access points tool, and I'm going to flip over to the AutoPlan tab. We'll leave it on the 9176. We'll leave all of the default settings alone, and we'll hit start the AutoPlan. So the automatic planner is going to only place access points inside the scope of the project, and it's only going to worry about giving us coverage inside the scope as well. So if there's somewhere on the network that, let's say that the auto planner, for some reason, it probably wouldn't, but let's say that it stuck something in this elevator shaft here, you could fix that by just grabbing the scope zones tool, take it out of scope, and then just go run the auto plan tool again. So we'll just run it again. And now it would avoid putting an access point in there. And also notice that it changed the placement a little bit because it didn't worry about providing coverage. Although I guess it put an AP right next to it, so maybe not a factor in this case. Maybe that's a bad example, but you get what I'm saying. So anyway, all that to say that the AutoPlan APs tool is only going to place things that are inside the scope of the project, and it's only going to worry about coverage inside the scope that you have defined. So that's pretty much everything that you need to know about scope zones in Hamina Network Planner. Of course, if you have questions, please feel free to email us at support@hamina.com. Go check out our knowledge bases. There's all kinds of information and other videos like this one there. Thanks for being here. Hope to see you in a Hamina video real soon. Bye now.